Taurili Alpha Mayava on Pacific Breakfast right here in 5:31 PI. Oh, sorry about that. Welcome back into Pacific Breakfast with me, Tawidi Liao from Mayava. We are joined this morning by the Honorable Aupito Toesulusulu Tofae William Seal, the Minister of Pacific People, with regards to the latest case, community case that has been recorded up in Northland, to give us more detail in terms of the last 24 hours with regards to everything from confirmation to the current government plan with regards to that. Whakataitera lava lau Fiongo for tuning us this morning. Tell us, what's the latest information with regards to why and how this New Zealander managed to pick up the virus after all of the current procedural steps were done?
Mm, mm. Yeah, and I think what we've got to remember is that because this person has followed all the correct procedures in being tested in her movement, she's been able to use the COVID-19 app. That we know a lot more about her movements. That we're now able to keep an eye on and test her, but also we know the number of people in her family. So we're testing family members there, and it makes the job easier for our public health people to just follow through the linkages and the context that we've been able to identify in her movements, so that we can get a hold of people, do that contact tracing work a lot easier if the person wasn't using the COVID-19 app. And secondly, like this morning, our courts have issued that they'll be using thermal imaging in all the Auckland courts in Northland. And we'll continue just to work through all of that. The scientists themselves will be looking at trying to track down and identify just exactly the makeup of this virus, whether there's some connection to existing cases or not. It could be a different strain. We just don't know. And we'll wait until we hear back from the scientists about their genomic testing.
We looked a little bit into the travel itinerary of this particular New Zealander. She has, on her way home, she stopped by and visited some of the places and some of the countries that are quite rampant in terms of the current COVID outbreak within Europe and within the age on her way home. For us,
Mm.
where's the focus right now for government? Is it on the system? If there is a, excuse the pun, if there is a bum to be kicked, do we know where and who it is right this point?
Mm. I think the thing to remember, Tawilili, is this is a virus, and the virus is behaving like a virus would. It's unseen, and so our first layer of protection is our borders. And in terms of, despite where she traveled from, she tested in the third day testing done. It was negative. She tested again on the 12th day testing was done. It was negative, and when she stayed for the 14 days, it was negative, and then she was allowed to be released from the managed quarantine. You'll remember also that the minister responsible for our managed quarantine, Mr. Hipkins, has also announced not too long ago another added protection where anybody leaving overseas countries, all overseas countries, there's now a pre-departure test other than Antarctica, Australia, and other overseas Pacific islands. The other added dimension also is that we're now introducing a nasal testing in addition to the saliva testing, in addition to the nasal testing for all the frontline staff. So there isn't. If we're going to kick a butt, it's the virus. I wouldn't be pointing my finger at the people returning to New Zealand, because this person, this individual here, has followed everything that so far are part of our protective layers, including when she was released, that in her movement she's continued to use the app. So I think let's wait and see in terms of what we come back with, whether it came from a pre-existing strain that it was out there in the community, or not. So let's just wait and see whether happen to be a surface of something else out in the quarantine management area. We just don't know it at this stage, Ili. And so when you ask whose butt should we kick at this time, let's not be too quick on this because we are dealing with a virus, and the virus is behaving as a virus does. It knows no boundaries. It doesn't care who you are.
It's becoming a double-edged sword because now we are getting into the point where you cannot travel unless you've either been tested, or in some countries now, some airlines, they're looking at you have to have a certificate to say that you've been vaccinated. We don't know when that's actually going to kick in. But then you look at some of the our Pacific Kiwis who are in Europe, or the cost of that vaccination plus the cost of isolation and then the cost of the ticket. It's becoming quite how shall we say, and with this, some of the people are saying, well, let's just close the borders now. Has this sort of shifted some of the plans far from where we were before? Are we looking at fully the hotels, right? Now people are saying if you're coming from Europe and high risk countries, we need a standalone isolation just for them, and then you downgrade it to other visitors or Kiwis returning home from parts of the world where the cases aren't so bad. Are we looking at a fast forward of all of these initiatives?
Look, I think what's happening, the Minister of Mr. Hipkins announced it that um, what we're doing here is something totally new. It's for all of the world, and so not only are we taking advice from our own scientists, but we're also looking and collecting data of what is happening in other countries. So we have the benefit of using the experience and intelligence that we're gathering um, by our scientists working together with scientists from throughout the world, as well as WHO. Our first layer of protection, of course, is our borders, and we continue to strengthen that as we learn more. Our second layer of protection, of course, is the contact tracing and the COVID-19 app. And part of that is also the continuation of us to be teaching and reminding our people about if you're sick, you stay home. If you're moving about, you continue to use the contact tracing app and you continue to wash your hands and just being mindful of the people that you mix and mingle with, as well as using the mask when you're using public transportation. Our next phase, in part of the whole protective measures against COVID-19, of course, is the vaccine. And our people are at the moment looking at making sure that we can confirm the safety of the 4 vaccines that we have purchased and then rolling that out. The benefit that we have is that vaccine, while it hasn't covered the world, is now being administered in a number of countries. And our officials here and our scientists are in connection with those countries and the data that's collected from that so that we can learn more when we are able to uh, 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 confirm the safety of the vaccine and then, of course, rolling it out. So we're learning as we go, is my point here, Ili, and adding on a number of layers of protection when when our scientists are feeling confident and assurance from the data that we're collecting from overseas, and as we learn more about the way this virus behaves. So at this point in time, everything that we have talked about and delivered to our communities in terms of protective measures remain the same. I sometimes think because we're able to freely move around and gather more so than other countries, that we forget that we're still in the middle of a global virus pandemic, and we've just got to be vigilant and alert at all times.
In saying that, I remember one of the vaccinations that we're receiving is the same one that Norway is currently using for its people, but we're also waiting to see the impact of it because of course, they've lost some elderlies as a result of
Yep.
the reaction to the test. So I'm sure that is something we'll speak to you and the Pacific leaders in the medical field. Now let's look at what would be the message from you
Oh yeah, no,
this
and
morning.
and we continue. We receive the data from Norway, and we're analyzing it. The initial feedback that we were getting from Norway is these were people really that were quite old and quite frail, and didn't have very long to live, was the information that we were getting. So, but from that, we're also learning just the dosages, the amount of dosages of the vaccine that we ought to give to vulnerable peoples. And so, this is the benefit of us being waiting and collecting data from a number of countries that are administering vaccine, and that's the data that we're using to make sure that when we do confirm which one, we're assured of its safety, assured of its dosages, and requirement to make sure that we keep everybody safe in New Zealand and in the Pacific region.
And that's what we're saying to a lot of people. One of the advantages for us to be able to sit back and watch is
Yeah,
having the least amount of cases that breaks through the MIQ. So though it's one case, but it allows us that opportunity. It's like a buffer. All right, we're good for now.
yeah.
For our community, Pacifica community, Lovionga, this what would be the message and the takeaway? Wake up from this latest case, because I'm thinking now churches now need to have these contact tracer app if this is the case, just the speed it
Yeah.
actually affects our community. What would be the key message from you this morning, from the morning?
Yeah, the key message is love for our people, as I've been sharing so far with Auckland as well as Wellington yesterday, is we must remain alert and pay attention. The messages, the early messages about washing our hands, using the app, and I'm saying to our elders, if you don't have an app, to record a diary of your movements. But of course, the other thing, if you're sick, stay home. You see, our community is probably the most vulnerable in terms of our our pre-existing illnesses. But then, of course, what I've been sharing with our communities is we've got to review our cultural practices, the sharing of food, the movements, the gatherings, and at this point of time, while we don't have a vaccine yet, we're just got to be alert and vigilant, look out for each other, and be mindful that even though we can move around with confidence and freedom, there is a pandemic that's raging the world, and we just got to be remember that and be alert about it. Because I think often because we're moving around with such freedom and confidence that we forget that we're still at war with the COVID-19 virus.
That is hopefully the rest of our diaspora listening in, even if you are down by the bluff and you're looking at Northland as a foreign country, please take that into consideration moving forward. Lawafyong for this morning and for the quick turnaround, because I messaged you last night. I was like, I wasn't sure if the minister will be ready, but thank you for always stepping up to inform our community, and we'll speak to you once again.
Yeah, let's. I'd also say don't panic, and let's be cautious about trying to blame people. This is, if anything, if anybody is to be blamed, it's the virus and not people. So, I think let's stay focused. Let's continue to uh, experience the beautiful Auckland sun and enjoy that. But let's just remain alert and let's remain vigilant, not only for yourselves and your families, but also for people in our communities and our churches and our extended families. Birthday, so forth.
Sorry for you. The Honourable Minister, Aupito Toesulusulu, Tofae William Seal, the Minister of Pacific People,